Welcome back to Meet the Coach again. I'm Pat Curran here with the co-founders. Tonight we've got Coach Dan Lemke. He's the co-DC and DB's coach at Prairie A&M. Coach, I appreciate you joining me.
Appreciate you having me, Pat.
Of course. And I know your background, but talk to us, just for the people who don't know who you are. Talk to us about how you got to where you are here, from a young man playing ball in the Midwest to a coach in the South.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Minnesota playing hockey. That's kind of the culture up there. I was on skates before I was 5 years old. So growing up playing hockey, always had a drive to play football, wanted to play football, but I didn't start playing until, until about eighth grade. So I had, good 5 years before college. I walked on at Western Michigan. I was there for 4 years, met my wife there. And the funny story is, with her, we were walking through campus one day at one of the bus stops, and she looked at me and goes, "Okay, what do you want to do for your job? What do you want to do when you get older?" I said, "I want to be a college football coach." She goes, "Oh, okay, that's interesting, And we got talking a little bit, and I said, "Well, really, I might be lucky to make $10,000 when I start out." And she looked at me kind of funny, and I said, "You in?" And she said, "Absolutely." So,
how long were you together at this point?
It was probably about a year.
Okay.
At that point. So now her and I have been together almost 20 years. We've been married. In June, it'll be 17 years we've been married. So when I talk about our progression and everything, I say we, because without her, I wouldn't have been able to get into the coaching profession, because my first year at St. Cloud State, I actually volunteered. We had been married the year before, so we had just hit our 1 year wedding anniversary. We were living in Texas early in our marriage, moved up to Minnesota in the middle of February. And she goes, "Where did you move me?" Because we had almost 50 inches of snow within, the first 3 days of being there. So I volunteered, and she ended up working 3 jobs so I could do that. So that's why it's a we thing in our household. So St. Cloud State, I was GA, graduated there with my master's degree, got hired on at St. Joe in Indiana, kind of worked around really the 35 corridor for quite a while, and was able to meet a lot of people along the way, because every spring break, I go visit somewhere and talk football for 2-3 days. And Tracy usually stays home, and I go do the football thing. And really, a couple of my jobs, at least 2, if not 3 of those jobs, have actually come from those spring break visits and meeting people and working camps all summer and doing things like that. And I still do that to this day. Last spring break, I ended up going to 3 different universities over the week, and just talking to people and making connections, but then also seeing what they're doing and how they do it. And that's how I got to FAMU. I was at FAMU 3 years before I got to Prairie View. And I had met James Spady along the way. He interviewed me when he was the head coach at Alabama A&M. That job didn't work out, but when he got to FAM, I went and visited them for spring break, just to see from the offensive side what they're doing, what they're teaching, what they're looking at, because I was defensive coordinator at the time, and had a great conversation and spent the day with Ralph Street, who was the defensive coordinator at FAM, and him and I hit it off, and that's how I got to FAM. And then how I got over here to Prairie View is all the network, it's all connections, right? So Bubba McDowell, who's our head coach here, worked for Willie Simmons when Willie was here at PV, and Ralph was a DC over here at PV, and they're really, really close. So, later in the summer, Bubba was looking for somebody to hire on staff, and Ralph recommended me, Willie recommended me, and things just kind of worked out where we were able to take the job and come on over here.
Yeah, but so the relationship is, we've had this conversation, it's the relationship is, and if you're not good or you're an asshole, that's not good for the relationship, and that's not going to work. Right. But when you are good and you are a good person, those relationships are so huge in this game. What do you think from a coaching perspective? What separates you from other guys that are in a similar position?
Well, over my whole adult, life. So from the time I went to college, everything I've done has been geared towards being a college football coach. It goes back as far as third grade. I wrote a story about being the head football coach and winning the Rose Bowl. Now I grew up in Minnesota where, it's Big Ten country. So the Rose Bowl was the deal.
Yeah.
And that was before you actually had the single national champion. It was a poll system.
Yeah.
So it goes all the way as far back as that. Even before I played football, I was going to be a college football coach. So when I went to Western and walked on and everything, and everything was geared towards me being a college football coach. So along my entire career, all the different areas and responsibilities I've had being at some smaller schools where you have 2, 3, sometimes 4 major responsibilities, that adds into it. The other part of it, Pat, is my background is exercise science. So when I went to college, I decided to major in exercise science so I could understand how the body is functioning and working from a physiological standpoint, in a biomechanical standpoint, so I can take that into coaching the techniques and the fundamentals and the things that we talk about as position players, and really relate that to getting them better and being more efficient in what they do. Sure. And the other part is, from a scheme standpoint, I've been blessed. Looking back, it's a blessing. I've worked for so many different coordinators, and I coordinated myself. So we've run so many different styles of defense that I can hop right in. When I got here to PV, they were 2 weeks into camp when I got on the field, but I was able to hop right in and know exactly what's going on and relate to how they're teaching it, and bring some other elements to the table that has helped us to progress.
Sure. What was that like coming in 2 weeks? 2 weeks in, there's a learning curve. You weren't great day one, I'm sure, right? But like, what do you think that has taught you from a coaching perspective and made you a better coach this year?
Well, it's funny because my first full-time job at St. Joseph's College, I got hired a week before training camp. So that was a whole nother deal. I had been a GA, had helped the defensive coordinators with the DBs and so forth, but this was a week before. So that started it off. And then when I got to the next stop, I came in 3 days before spring ball. So my first day was 3 days before spring ball, met with the DC. We had a walkthrough that Friday afternoon. So literally 4 hours after I got out of HR, we're on the field trying to coach them up. Sure. And it was completely different style defense, different terminology, everything. Yeah. And then I met with the DC the next day, and he was gone Sunday. So I just lived in the office. And what I learned there was learn what you need to learn for that next practice. And if you don't know when they ask, just tell them, be honest. Because they're saying, hey, coach, what about this? And I said, to be honest, I'm not sure. We're not there yet. Let's focus on this stuff. And then you can progress along the way. So all of that led to the stop before here, where my first day was report day of camp. So, this is
crazy
late in the hire. So it was really nothing new to me. But hopping in right away, you just got to understand how to correlate what the calls are in their terms to prior terms and get that switched in your mind as fast as you can.
And that's the tough part. You know what the concept is, but you've got to be able to get you've got to be able to get your guy to do the thing, or your guys.
Yep.
As the defensive staff.
Yep. It's like talking English. We're talking to each other in English, right?
Right.
But if you came here talking to me in Chinese and I'm trying to talk English, I have no idea what's going on. So it's getting that same language put together as quick as possible. And quite honestly, it was easier this time around than the last one, because I had just called the defense for 5 straight years, how I wanted it called in my terms, how I saw it. And then you got to learn somebody else's on day one, so that took a little bit more, but it led to a much easier transition here.
Sure. How do you, then when you come there, how do you build your culture? Obviously within the team's culture, how do you build your own culture there?
The first thing is the motto, wherever I am, whatever group is with me, is everything you got every time you go. And that was something that's been developed. And that's near and dear to my heart. That's been something that I developed over the years, but really probably, what year is it now? It's 23. So about 14, 15 years ago is where I came up with that saying and that motto, because you always hear about everybody saying, give 110%. Well, let's be real. There's no such thing as 110%.
Always drives me nuts. Yeah, go ahead.
100% is what you have. But the thing is, what you think 100% isn't what your body is capable of. Yeah. So that's where the everything you got came from. I don't give me 100, just give me everything you got and do it every single time you go. So that's the other part of it. If you do that, you're going to get better. Your performance may drop after the first rep, day one, fine. Next day it'll be a rep and a half. And pretty soon that compounds on top of it. And now late in the fourth quarter, in overtime, you're still playing like it's the first, because you've given everything you got. Sure. And the other part is that's a life lesson too. You know, there's a lot of my players that hit me up and say, Coach, you know, I own this dojo. There's a guy who owns a dojo up in Atlanta. That's the motto for the dojo. You know, we've got lawyers across the country, and that's their motto for their practice, is everything you got every time you go, because it's not just about football. Anything you do in life, give everything you got to it every single time you go. So that's the basis of what we do in the culture we create within the room. They've got to understand that. And once they get that, things just kind of start flowing. You know, you got to have fun with it. You've got to teach them. You got to be a great teacher. So you're teaching them the game, you're teaching them what to do better, how to be efficient. But again, it all goes back to, did you give me everything you got? If you didn't, we got to get that handled first so we can get you to the levels that you want to reach.
Sure. How do you evaluate yourself, self-evaluation wise? What do you do on your end to look back every off season, or I guess even after spring ball, like, all right, what could I have done better here on your end?
Well, I'm always evaluating myself. If something's not going the way that you envision it, the first place I look is, did I install it correctly? Did I explain it in a way that they can understand it? Did we rep it? Did we drill it? Did we show them what could I do differently to get them to understand the information? And quite honestly, especially early on, as you're learning how to coach your position, because we all think we know it, and then you get in that coaching role and you find out it's harder to explain it than you thought.
Yeah.
So I used my wife. I said, hey, Teresa, come here. We're struggling with something. This is what I'm telling them and asking them to do. What's that mean to you? And if she can repeat it back and know what I'm talking about and go at least slowly, you know, in the backyard or in the living room, sometimes do it, then I know that they should have a pretty good understanding of what we're asking. They just have to learn how to do it or just go do it. But if she's confused on it, okay, and we work through it. Here's what we're trying to get. What else could I say differently? So always evaluating the teaching, the installs, that type of stuff. But really, I look at the film. I grade every single practice as if I'm grading a game. I've got my production chart. I've got my technique grades, the positives, the negatives, all the emphasis points, the goals for the spring. I only have 3 goals because I don't want a long list, but we're always grading that and looking at those things. And then, you know, after season and exit meetings, talking to the players, give them the information, but I always give them an opportunity to, you know, give me feedback on the way I coached them and see if there's areas they think I could have done differently or better, because really the whole coaching deal in teaching and raising kids is about getting them the information that they need so they can be successful in what they're trying to do. That's what we're here for. We're trying to make them perform on the field to the best of their ability. So if they're not getting the information, what good is that?
Yeah, no good at all. You mentioned three goals this spring. Are you cool sharing those?
Yeah, absolutely. We keep it pretty broad and easy, if you will. I want perfect alignment, 100% alignment. If we tell you to, be aligned at arm's length away, you're an arm's length away. If we say be aligned at 5 yards depth, you're at 5, not 5.5. You're at 5. Because what I noticed in evaluating everything and where the issues come in, a lot of it's alignment. If we're misaligned, we're not giving ourselves the best opportunity to go execute what we're supposed to do. The second goal is a positive technique grade as a whole. So not individually, we grade individually, but then we look at the position group as a whole. Are we positive in our technique? And I'm very, very strict on technique. Any misstep in practice in spring is a minus in technique, because really you look at the alignment that gives you the chance, but alignment and technique, that's typically where the breaks happen within a play. And if you have great alignment and your technique is on point, we can go be successful.
Sure.
So those are two critical areas that it sounds broad, but it's really narrow.
Yeah.
And then the third goal is a positive production grade as a whole, as a position group. So there's a whole bunch of ways they can get positive points, but there's about 5 or 6 they can lose points in alignment, assignment, loafing, foolish penalties, missed tackles. That all factors in. The technique is a separate grade. They don't get positive or negative for that. They just get their percentage. Because I moved to that, Pat, because a lot of times it was, are they a plus or a minus on the play? Well, where do you come up with it was a good play, a bad play? One person I worked for said, okay, we're looking alignment, assignment, and technique. Well, there's 3 areas. There's a couple ways to view it. If they get a minus in any of them, it's a minus play, right?
Sure.
Or if they get 2 positives and 1 minus, it's a positive. So it's 2 out of the 3. So I just moved to a technique grade. Positive plus or minus is off technique, and then the production, because that's really what we want to see, is them produce on the field, right, and with the opportunities that they have.
Yeah. Do you share that every practice?
I do. I do.
Okay. Do you go through it? Like I mean, I know guys watch film, but some guys will rip through it or find key points or.
Yeah. Well, what I do to set up my meeting is the first thing we do a Snapple fact of the day. I love doing Snapple facts.
Like, do you actually have a Snapple?
But no.
Okay.
I wish I could, but if you go to Snapple's website, they've got like thousands of facts, right? Sure. So today's Snapple fact of the day for our meeting was that the longest recorded hiccup lasted 68 years. Imagine that. 68 years of hiccuping.
Yeah.
So that was a fact I gave them today. But we start with something like that. It's kind of fun right away. They're like, why? What? But now they're like, okay, what's the fact? Slugs have 4 noses. That's a fact. That was one of them earlier. And we actually, with my boys tonight, they were talking about something about having 4 noses, just being, 5-year-old, 3-year-old, said actually slugs have 4 noses. But so we start with that, and then we get into the bulk of what we're doing, and we will show them, here's how we graded out as a group with our goals, and then I'll break it down individually so they all know exactly where they're at, and then we'll get into the adjustments, the film, and all that type of stuff. But I always want to, if we set the goals, we got to keep revisiting them. Otherwise, you're just putting it down for no reason.
Totally. What from a DB perspective, what do you think is one thing other DB coaches should be teaching or focusing on that maybe you see like a lot of like oversight on?
Well, Again, my background with exercise science and biomechanics and in the strength world, I'm really looking at the ability to go execute and do their job. So one thing we focus heavy on is body positioning on routes, especially as corners. We're in the run fits. We got to teach them run fits. We got to teach them how to set edges and do that. But the bulk of what we do is pass game or pursuit. So when you look at pass game, there's really four positions they're going to be on a route, and you have to work those. You know, you're a high arm position, meaning you're over top of the route's underneath you. You're in a out of phase position where you just got to run, just run, play the hands. You're in phase, or you're in a hipped out position. Really, there's not any other body positions you're going to have on a receiver. So we really work on that. And that got developed when I was coaching the whole back end. I had the corners, I had the nickel, and I had the two safeties. In one spring, I had one corner the entire spring. So all the guys had to play all the positions, which was great because they got to understand how it pieced together.
Sure.
And in our meetings, we're always talking about, here's our role, understand your job, but here's how things piece together. It's the puzzle. How does it fit? But when you look at those body positions on it, you could plug any of them in wherever you want. And as long as they have the fundamentals and the technique, understanding of, okay, if I'm matching a route, if I'm in man, if I'm in zone, where are these routes at compared to me? We can go execute. Sure. We spend a lot of time on that. And we spend a lot of time on our what I call the route progression, the top of the route. So that's middle of the route, top of the route. We always hit stance and start, the beginning of the route. There's only 3 phases to a route, you know, the beginning, the middle, the end. And if you can focus on those, then your eyes are next with eye progressions. And then it doesn't matter what the offense is drawing in the dirt or what concept they're coming out in. Sure. You know where your progressions go, you know where you're at on the route, you know how to get in and out of breaks efficiently and where to drive, and you're good.
Sure. That makes sense. What's last thing we'll get out of here? What's the best piece of advice you got from a coaching perspective?
There's been a lot of advice over the years. Sure. And you know, a lot of it is football based. You get some family based. So I'm going to share 2 things with you. The first one was from my head coach, Gary Darnell. What he told me and my wife at a convention, we meet up with him and Mrs. Darnell every year, and she had the absolute best cookies you could imagine.
Okay.
So, but his thing is, as a family, he recommends do not go somewhere without your family. Don't take a job where you have to leave them behind. Make sure they're with you the entire time, because ultimately, when all's said and done, that's what matters, is the family. You know, when we started having kids, make sure you are there for those kids, because once football is over, and it ends for everybody, you know, playing ends, coaching's going to end, whether it's retirement by choice, by force, if you will. At some point, it's done. So make sure your family is always there and they're at the top. From the football side of it, it was from one of my mentors, Coach Bumpus. You know, he said, make sure you understand it's about the players. Your time's done. You're done playing. It's about them. So keep your focus on what it is for them and let them have their time that you had and loved so much, why you got into the coaching profession to start. So let those players experience it, build them up, you know, be hard on them, love them, do all those things, but always keep in mind that it's their time to play. You had your time, you're there to help them enjoy it and be successful down the way.
That's great stuff. And you know, they've got a window, just like you had a window playing, I had a window playing. That window as a coach can be 10 times longer, like literally. Yeah. So that's great advice. I love that. Thanks again for jumping on. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate you. Have a good rest of the night.
Thanks for having me.